There are thousands of studies showing the effects of prenatal testosterone on the developing brain. Even before birth, exposure to testosterone changes the way in which male and female brains grow. There's no way that behavioral differences we see between men and women are purely due to socialization, unless someone wants to argue that the unborn child is capable of learning gendered stereotypes while they are still in the womb.
The debate of nature versus nurture is a constant topic of discussion. Most science points towards many parts of an individual's personality as being heavily influenced by the genetics and development during pregnancy, as elaborated on in that previous clip. Of course, however, there is a difference between predispositions and predetermination, with personal experiences and one's growth and life in general being at times equally as important in moulding them. The Saiyan Arc of Dragon Ball explores the concept well through 3 characters: Son Goku, Son Gohan, and Piccolo. Though Dragon Ball as a whole has this as a running theme to some extent, regardless of whether it was a conscious decision on Toriyama's part or not, with the redemption of several characters and Vegeta's character arc as a whole, but the Saiyan Arc is probably the best display of it as both a core element of its narrative and in terms of numerous examples condensed down into one story arc. Out of these 3 characters, Piccolo is easily the one whose characterization and growth is most rooted within nurture over nature. Though his nature was fundamentally different from that of Piccolo Daimao for reasons I explained in the previous video, even further change from his characterization 5 years prior can be seen in both his mannerisms and the state of the Dragon World, with him evidently not having taken the opportunity to conquer the world or attempt to kill Goku again despite avenging his father being the reason for his being. Part of this could be due to a feeling of needing to be over-prepared compared to his last encounter, which is somewhat questionable. Him initially mistaking Raditz' ki for Goku's from the size makes how constant he was in tracking his rival's progress vague at best. Piccolo's line of "curse your fate as I do" tells us so much about his character at that point in so little time. Those 5 years would have been ones spent pondering many things, such as his purpose making him just an enforcer of his father's will, his tie to Kami limiting what he could achieve, and such limits to his life making it doubtful him achieving his life goals would have any meaning if he were to soon die, as Kami noted about his premonition. He had already become less demonic in nature as made apparent by Goku and Raditz's souls going to the afterlife. And I must also praise Toriyama using Piccolo's arc to tie up a potential hole with more care than he would in later arcs. That couldn't just happen instantly, showing the audience he has undergone a distinct change in character. Moreover, when considering Kami's state and Piccolo may want to leave his legacy behind through Gohan, it adds another layer to this statement when Piccolo's existence is purely to be Daimao's legacy, and his limited lifespan will make him amount to just another failure in that goal. This existential turn of events is pretty subtle and showcases both Piccolo's character growth and depth in what's a great case of either accidental or intended genius. Though we only get glimpses of his time with Gohan, it does a lot to perfectly encapsulate his growth and the impact nurture has on Piccolo. Their conversation roughly halfway through their Shugyo, in which Gohan mentions Piccolo not being as bad as his previous self, is a blow to Piccolo in it confirming he truly cannot live up to Piccolo Daimao standards, but also helps free him from them. We see this through visual storytelling rather than exposition, in him having changed Gohan's gi to his own with no trace of the Ma kanji the next time we see the two. It's during his split decision sacrifice to save Gohan that Piccolo makes it clear what led to this change. Gohan was the only person ever approached Piccolo as more than an opponent, and that may extend to those before the Bunrei that birthed the original Piccolo too, with what is pieced together of the latter's past after the battle with Vegeta. As I've said in the previous video, Buddhist reincarnation notes the experiences of life as a decisive factor in differences, and Piccolo having someone to nurture his character truly saved him from Daimao's nature in the end. Part Saiyan, part Earthling, Gohan is very much a being of 2 natures. With this and the events around him in this arc, he's probably the most complex of these 3 in judging where his nature ends and his nurture begins. His initial characterization of being shy and abhorring violence seems to be very much a case of Chi-Chi's upbringing, particularly his desire to be a great scholar. It's through his training under Piccolo and the aftermath of it that we get into the meat of viewing how his experience in nature overlap with both his interactions with Piccolo and his battle with Nappa. When captured by Piccolo, Gohan tells him that he wishes to be a great scholar without any prompting, and doesn't abandon such aspirations even after a year away from Chi-Chi, which shows a path of study and education is something he takes to naturally, rather than purely forced upon him. His kind actions towards Piccolo, despite the latter's severe treatment of him, also points towards kindness and understanding as part of Gohan's nature, though I'll mention the dark side of this seemingly positive action soon. It's during the battle with Nappa that we see much of how the time with Piccolo has impacted him. Piccolo's Shugyo for Gohan was overall a very negative type of nurturing, in him giving no constructive advice beyond to dodge his attacks, and putting much severe pressure on the child still in their formative years, who, by the time of their Shugyo ending, is still 2 years younger than the minimum training age of the infamously strict Spartan children. It is no surprise that Gohan immediately breaks under pressure with this and being exposed to so much death in very little time. Not only does this contrast with the far more positive results we see of Goku's nurturing for Gohan's capabilities through Shugyo far later in the story, but we see when Gohan directly confronts Nappa, the former's nurture and nature in play. Though a controversial matter when discussing series, it can't be ignored how many of Gohan's character traits after the year with Piccolo line up with symptoms of Stockholm Syndrome, when it's difficult not to realistically see abandoning a child for 6 months, placing them in a deadly repetitive cycle, and offering no freedom as anything short of psychological abuse. Positive feelings towards the abuser and justifying their behaviour present in Gohan consciously recognising Piccolo as being as respectable as his father, and unconsciously in his rage at Piccolo's death, which I will mention soon. Or negative responses to those helping free him from this behaviour and cycle, in his outburst to his mother when she had his best interests at heart. And it wasn't as though the trip to Namek seemed to require Gohan at that time. It is important to remember that, though this is psychologically detrimental to a human, we aren't dealing with a pure earthling wherein the complexities of Gohan's Saiyan nature and nurturing come out. Such severe conditions arguably helped Gohan embrace aspects of his Saiyan nature, even setting the rage boosts aside. People overlook him finding fun in toying with the wild Saurus despite his kindness towards nature. And, even considering his belief their tail would grow back, there's an underlying darkness to this action against a creature incapable of understanding his rationale, similar to Saiyans occasionally liking to toy with their opponents. In a very yin and yang manner, one can consider the results of his nurture from human standards to enhance the nature by Saiyan standards, and vice versa. We see this in the Nappa fight, as the rage enhancing his ki, exclusive to him from the mixing of Saiyan and Earthling blood, comes forth once Nappa directly attacks him. The results of both his Saiyan nature to kill or be killed mixing with his experiences of Shugyo with Piccolo combine to bring out what's necessary to survive. We see the nurture of both his Saiyan and Earthling sides reconcile soon after, with his rage reaching new heights upon Piccolo's death, with the bond he gained for him, regardless of the unhealthy aspects of it, causing him to react even more intensely than seeing his father almost killed. It's in the fight with Vegeta that both sides of his nature are balanced perfectly. Though Gohan relies on the Saiyan nature of an Ozaru to overpower Vegeta, he would have targeted friend and foe alike if not for his Earthling nature also present in him that allowed Kuririn to quickly reason with him to target Vegeta, unlike his father having been uncontrollable when transformed. Overall, Gohan's mixed heritage helps provide a complex web of nature and nurture when viewed from both human and Saiyan perspectives. This being the arc which recontextualizes many aspects of the protagonist, the ideas of Goku's Saiyan nature opposing mixing with his earthly nurture is quite obvious. Goku, of course, initially rejects the idea that the savage and cruel aspects of his Saiyan blood are part of him, yet it is difficult to look back at some of his more violent actions in childhood without this genetic factor being at play, especially during the Piccolo Daimao arc, as well as his desire for greater challenges to an extent deemed excessive even by peers with similar Budo ideals. Perhaps such a thing is what causes Goku to have accepted that he is a Saiyan, and his genetics play a role to some extent during the 6 months taken to reach Kaio's planet. Before that though, we do have an often overlooked reaction of unease when Raditz informs Goku their parents died during Planet Vegeta's destruction. One that is difficult to say is from the care and personality part of his nurture or natural care for one's parents. The same can be said of Goku letting go of Raditz's tail when the latter appeals to their brotherly connection, with Goku seemingly to do so instinctually. Though this can mainly be attributed to the values that his Chi-Chan Gohan instilled in him along with what spiritual ideals may have been cultivated through Popo's teachings, for similar reasons as to why he refuses to execute other downed opponents such as the Ginyu Tokusentai or Frieza, there may be a natural desire to protect one's family being at play. It's during his fight with Vegeta that nature and nurture play a part of a constant back and forth. His environment and experiences give him the ki control necessary to use the Kaioken at a level to surpass Vegeta, who would be his natural superior otherwise. Vegeta then turns things around by transforming into an Ozaru, the symbol of a Saiyan's primitive strength, whereas nurture backfires in Goku not being able to do so, as Kami removed his tail. It's through the nurture aspect of the bonds Goku had formed that allowed the Dragon Team to overcome Vegeta that would have been impossible if his natural state had remained unchanged. It is when making Kuririn halt the final blow though that nature ultimately shines through, with him admitting to his natural desire to fight a strong opponent like Vegeta once more, without any of the pretenses tied to his nurture, as with him sparing Piccolo being every bit as much about saving Kami as it was about having an opponent to challenge him. Thus, through this action, the arc's focus on nature versus nurture is given a fitting conclusion. Speaking of Vegeta, I would also mention how much the concept of nature versus nurture plays into his character in the arc, but, as the rationale is provided in the next arc, it was best to focus on these 3 main examples of how Toriyama handles a common psychological debate, through the actions and very different answers within this arc. For the video on the Frieza arc, we go back to discussions on the series' Buddhist elements and how its most iconic transformation ties into them.